The Israeli military has dropped thousands of pamphlets warning people where you are in northern Gaza to leave. Why don't you go with your family south?
And if I go, who treats my patients? They are not animals. They have the right to receive proper health care.
I'm a doctor, so I'm particularly worried about the bombing of hospitals and the fact that they're running out of fuel and the children there that are on incubators and are going to die. And we just felt that we couldn't stay silent anymore, and we just had to come.
I work in the hospital. Hospitals are safe spaces for everyone, and that's how they need to be. And that's why we are protesting for that, because they are co-workers of us.
About this issue of telling doctors to leave their patients, choosing your own lives over your patients. Can you talk about that choice, since so many patients can't leave, for example, babies and incubators?
You think I went to medical school and for my postgraduate degrees for a total of 14 years, so I think only about my life and not my patients?
We are in a moment where it is important to act, and I am aware that one of the most significant ways I act upon the largest part of the world around me is by saying things on this channel. If I am going to say something useful, I should start by considering who I'm speaking to, then I can think about what I'm able to say. I don't think I'm going to change anyone's mind about whether or not a genocide is happening. In part because I feel quite strongly that everyone already knows one is, and a minority of the world, including practically everyone in power in all the world's most powerful countries, has decided to ignore it. They hope it is over quickly and forgotten about. Genocide is a political tool, and as a political tool, it is used around the world all the time. It behoves us to step away from rigid definition in order to understand what is happening right now, but I don't mean what is happening in Gaza. What is happening in Gaza is nakedly genocidal and meets everyone's definition. Everyone understands a genocide is happening. But I repeat myself. The reason we have to step away from definition is to understand the response by the people of the world to genocide in Gaza. The reason that people are marching in London, Washington, France, India, Australia, Indonesia, Turkey, all around the world is not simply that they see the political tool of genocide alive and well and fear that they may be its eventual victims. Rather, people all around the world are being exposed in concrete terms to how our geopolitical order systematically uses violence to maintain control, and they see that it is wrong. This, of course, speaks to their struggle is our struggle. Just as systemic violence means ethnic cleansing and genocide in the Middle East, Africa, the Caucasus, Eastern Europe, all resource-rich indigenous lands around the world, it also means the eternal genocide of the poor by the ruling class. The contradiction between our supposedly democratic, supposedly peaceful societies and the use of tremendous systemic violence is exposed spectacularly. This is why our politicians hope that it is over quickly and forgotten. So let's think a little more about who I'm speaking to. I'm aware that most of the people hearing this will be in richer countries that are allies of Israel, in Europe, Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and of course the United States. I am aware that most of the people hearing this will be experiencing this genocide through articles, podcasts, and screens. I am myself. Because of this, it is very important that we turn our gaze upon ourselves and understand the ways that we are materially situated in relation to Gaza. Because if we only experience this spectacularly, it might feel like there is nothing we can do, no connection we have to what is unfolding. And then, it might even feel easier for us if this was over quickly and forgotten about. Not so. There is plenty we can do. So, I'd like to start with something that appeared on one of my screens in relation to this, around which I would like to structure a lot of the rest of what I have to say. The following is a passage from the Quran. Allah's apostle said, "Help your brother, whether he is an oppressor or he is an oppressed one." People asked, "Oh, Allah's apostle, it is all right to help him if he is oppressed, but how should we help him if he is an oppressor?" The Prophet said, "By preventing him from oppressing others. Here I can revisit the idea that I'm not going to change anyone's minds for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it is politically expedient for the politicians of our countries if Gaza is leveled and everyone moves on. Because again, genocide is a political tool. Azerbaijan recently used military violence to ethnically cleanse the Artsakh region in Armenia. The British all-party parliamentary group on Azerbaijan was, of course, aware of this, but they didn't care because it was politically expedient not to care, because Azerbaijan is an ally of the UK and they wanted firmer control of the Baku oil field. This, for nation-states, is so much of what being an ally means. When defenders of the status quo want us to come to the aid of one of our allies, this relationship is very important. But when they want us not to stop our allies from committing atrocities, they work very hard to tell us that there is nothing that, say, Britain could do to influence the decisions of Israel. This is, of course, nonsense. If Britain had no say over a ceasefire in Gaza, then our parliament wouldn't have voted on it. Whether it is in Armenia for oil, Ukraine or Gaza for land, or the Congo for cheap labor and cobalt and other rare earth metals for consumer electronics, we can see that violence is used against this group or that to reinforce exploitation, extraction, and imperialism. For those who perpetuate the system that uses this systematic violence, it is easier not to care, and therefore I am not going to change their minds. Secondly, I recognize my position as some random woman in a video online, in contrast to the position of people in my audience. If your brother is an oppressor, your ability to change his mind is far greater than mine, and that includes your ability to change the mind of your elected representative by writing to them, or withdrawing your support, or marching, or protesting outside their office. However, to be realistic about our position, enmeshed in the machinery of death, often to stop an oppressor from oppressing others, we must stop them. For years now, Palestine Action have been shutting down Israeli weapons factories in the UK and informing people of the local communities what is being done on their doorstep, thereby gaining their support, because once again, the people of the world want rid of this systemic violence in all its forms, and once they begin to see it, they see how it is all the same. In recent weeks, Palestine Action have been joined by Workers for a Free Palestine, union activists blockading British arms factories supplying Israel, Palestine Action US, and protesters blockading ports where shipments are trying to leave for Israel from the US and Australia. Recently, an autonomous group of anarchists also poured cement into the water supply of a venue that was holding a fundraiser gala for Friends of the IDF, rendering the venue unusable and halting the fundraising effort. They then published cheap and easily replicable instructions for how to do the same online. On November 15th, activists from the Stop Cop City movement in Georgia set fire to 6 cement trucks set to pour the foundations of Cop City, an ersatz urban environment for the training of American police as an invading force into urban working-class communities. I'm not saying this directly benefits Gazans, of course, but it is all part of the same machine. The IDF train American police. The IDF want to use Cop City for training themselves, and even have something very similar they call Mini Gaza, an environment they use to preemptively deaden themselves to the horrors of war by practicing in a physical simulation. Stop Cop City, which has been described by Palestine Action US as, quote, the vanguard of direct action in our country, recognizes the attempt to make the people there less human, to make the systematic use of violence against them easier, and recognizes that we must stop them. It is vital that sabotage and protest build in parallel, because while direct action can slow this atrocity immediately, it also shows everyone the same thing as the growing protests, that the people overwhelmingly want one thing, and our elected representatives are not listening. They are hostile, even, and this exposes another contradiction, that our parliaments work to mediate class tensions in favour of the ruling class, that their policies and platforms are not based on the needs and desires of some base within the population whom they represent, but are wholly of their own interests, and the only things they ever do for our interests are in fact to make us pliable and productive. That our democracies are only democratic insofar as they convince us that they are, and when they act so starkly against what we want, they risk shattering the illusion. Biden has said there is no possibility of a ceasefire. British MPs have voted against it. Now is a moment when it is important to act, and they are doing all they can to keep us inactive, and by doing so, perpetuating the same system that murders Gazans, Armenians, Congolese, starves the poor, and burns the planet, and deprives us of democracy, and dignity, and justice. The same system that brings us eternally back to moments like this. This is a moment where everyone is coming to see. We must stop them.